Okay, so we're diving deep into some seriously mind-bending stuff today, like secret government projects,
Mhm.
exploring psychic phenomena. Sounds like a movie, right? But these programs actually existed.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Crazy, huh? And alongside all these declassified files, we'll be looking at the Law of One. It's a really fascinating spiritual philosophy.
It is. And what's really interesting here is, do these programs like MKUltra Stargate and the Gateway Experience, do they validate any of the concepts from the Law of One? Can we connect these two worlds, the world of science and the world of metaphysics?
Okay, so first, let's imagine a dimly lit room. Maybe there's some incense burning. Stacks of declassified files next to these metaphysical texts. That's the vibe we're going for today. A
Well,
little mystery, a little deep
I
inquiry.
like that. Captures the essence of what we're doing, exploring the fringes of knowledge.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. First, a quick overview of these CIA programs. MKUltra is probably the most well-known and pretty notorious.
It is. MKUltra was the CIA's attempt to delve into mind control. They were searching for ways to influence thoughts, manipulate behavior, even using things like truth serums. And some of their methods were, well, let's just say ethically questionable. They experimented with LSD, sometimes on people who didn't even know they were being given the drug.
Yeah, that whole LSD experimentation thing, it's a dark chapter for sure. And to make matters even more mysterious, a lot of those MKUltra files, they were destroyed. So we're left with more questions than answers.
Right, it adds to the intrigue. We only have fragments of the story. But let's move on to the Stargate project. They focused on something called remote viewing.
So remote viewing, is that like psychic spying? Trying to see things far away using just your mind?
Exactly. And some people involved in this program claim to have remarkable success. Remote viewers like Ingo Swann and Pat Price, they were able to describe locations, events, even things hidden from normal view just by focusing their minds.
Wow, okay, that's mind-blowing. But if they were having so much success, why was the program shut down?
Well, the reasons are still debated. Some say the results weren't consistently reliable. Others suggest maybe there were political reasons. Or maybe the information they were gathering became too sensitive. It's hard to say for sure.
Okay, so we've got mind control and psychic spying. What about the Gateway program? What were they up to?
The Gateway program was all about exploring altered states of consciousness. They used a technology called hemisync, which uses specific sound frequencies to synchronize the brainwaves and induce what they called the gateway experience.
And what exactly was this Gateway experience supposed to lead to?
Well, their theory was that the universe is like a giant hologram. And this experience was about tapping into that holographic reality, expanding consciousness, and potentially accessing information or abilities that are beyond our normal perception.
Hold on, the universe is a hologram. That's a pretty trippy concept.
It is, and it gets even more interesting when you start connecting it to the ideas presented in the Law of One.
Okay, so let's talk about the Law of One. Can you give us a brief overview for those who might not be familiar with it? What are the central ideas?
The Law of One is a fascinating body of work that claims to be channeled information from an extraterrestrial entity named Ra. At its core, it's a philosophy of interconnectedness, emphasizing that we are all part of a single universal consciousness. It's like we are all threads woven into this vast cosmic tapestry.
So not just humans, but everything. Animals, plants, even rocks and stars. We're all connected in some fundamental way.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness is expressed through what Ra calls the Law of One, a principle suggesting that all is one. Separation is an illusion, and we are all ultimately part of the same divine source.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty big concept.
It is, and the Law of One delves into many more concepts like reincarnation, different densities of reality, and the role of free will in our spiritual evolution. It even discusses the idea of wanderers, souls from higher densities who choose to incarnate on Earth to help humanity.
Wanderers. So some people listening right now could actually be extraterrestrial beings just hanging out on Earth.
It's a possibility, isn't it?
Yeah,
And we can explore these ideas in more detail as we go deeper into this deep dive.
for sure. Before we do that, you mentioned something earlier that I found really fascinating. The CIA's interest in Uri Geller. This is the guy who claimed to bend spoons with his mind, right?
Yes. Uri Geller was a controversial figure who claimed to have psychic abilities. What's remarkable is that the CIA, with all their skepticism and secrecy, actually brought him in for testing. They designed experiments to try and rule out any possibility of trickery and see if there was any validity to his claims.
So even the CIA, with all their resources and scientific rigor, couldn't completely dismiss the possibility of psychic phenomena.
It seems that way. And this brings us to the heart of our exploration today. The question of whether these CIA programs offer any evidence to support the ideas. put forth in the Law of One.
Okay, so we've laid out the groundwork. We've got these secret government programs exploring mind control psychic abilities
Ah,
and altered states of consciousness. And we've got the Law of One, with its profound teachings about universal consciousness and spiritual evolution. Now, the big question is, do these seemingly separate realms intersect? Do they offer any clues or validation for each other?
that's the mystery we're going to unravel together.
I'm ready to dive in. Let's see what we can find.
Let's do it. Welcome back to our deep dive into the connections between secret CIA programs and the Law of One.
You know, I've been doing some thinking since our last conversation, and it's a lot to process. Mind control experiments, psychic spies, altered states of consciousness, a philosophy that talks about a universe as a hologram, beings from other dimensions. I mean, it's like reality is starting to feel a lot more like science fiction.
I think that's the point. These topics challenge our understanding of reality, and they invite us to consider possibilities that might seem at first glance out there or unbelievable, but if we're open to it, it can be a truly mind-expanding journey.
Okay, I'm definitely open to exploring.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? How do we connect the dots between these seemingly separate worlds?
Well, let's start by looking at the concept of consciousness. It's a key theme in both the Law of One and these CIA programs. The programs were essentially trying to understand and manipulate consciousness through various means, whether it was through drugs, technology, or psychic training.
Right, and the Law of One approaches consciousness from a more spiritual perspective, suggesting that it's not just limited to our individual minds, but that it's a fundamental aspect of the universe itself.
Exactly. And this is where we can start to see some parallels. For example, remember the Gateway program and their idea of the universe as a hologram?
Yeah, that was a wild one.
Well, the Law of One also talks about the nature of reality, suggesting that what we perceive as the physical world is actually a projection of a deeper, more fundamental reality, a bit like a hologram. It's fascinating to see those similar ideas emerging from both scientific exploration and these channeled teachings.
It's almost like they're arriving at the same concept from different directions, one through scientific experimentation and the other through a mystical, spiritual lens.
I think that's a great observation, and it makes you wonder if there's some underlying truth that connects these different perspectives. Maybe science and spirituality aren't as separate as we tend to think they are.
Okay, so we've got this connection around the nature of reality. What other points of convergence can we find?
Let's look at the concept of energy, particularly the idea of subtle energy fields. That might influence consciousness. Remember the CIA's interest in Kundalini energy? That dormant force often described as coiled at the base of the spine?
Yeah, I remember that. They were exploring it as part of their research into altered states of consciousness. It always struck me as odd that a government agency would be looking into something that's often associated with yoga and meditation.
It is a bit unexpected, but it shows that they were willing to explore unconventional avenues in their quest to understand human potential. And when we look at the Law of One, we find some connections. The channeled entity, talks about energy centers within the body that correspond to these ancient yogic concepts.
So both the CIA, through their research, and the Law of One through its channeled teachings, were pointing towards these subtle energy systems within us. That might play a role in consciousness, and perhaps even psychic abilities.
That's one interpretation, and it raises some fascinating questions. If these energy systems are real, how do they work? What is their relationship to consciousness? Could they be the key to unlocking abilities that we currently consider paranormal?
Those are some big questions, and it makes me wonder if the CIA's research into things like remote viewing and psychic abilities was actually tapping into these subtle energy systems, even if they didn't fully understand what they were dealing with.
It's certainly a possibility. And it brings us back to the central question of this deep dive. Do these CIA programs validate the Law of One?
Right. Because if these programs were inadvertently stumbling upon evidence, that supports the existence of subtle energy systems and expanded states of consciousness. That would be pretty significant.
It would be. However, it's important to remember that the evidence from these programs is often fragmented, inconclusive, and open to interpretation. There's no smoking gun, no definitive proof that directly confirms the Law of One's teachings.
But there are these intriguing parallels, these points of convergence that make you wonder if there's something more to it all.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of this exploration. We're not looking for absolute proof, but for connections, for patterns, for insights that might help us understand the bigger picture.
And what about those who might be skeptical? Those who might dismiss the Law of One as just another New Age belief system, or the CIA programs as misguided attempts to delve into the paranormal? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that skepticism is healthy. It's important to question, to critically examine the evidence, and to avoid jumping to conclusions.
Hmm.
However, I would also encourage them to keep an open mind, to consider the possibility that there might be more to reality than what we can currently measure, or explain with our conventional scientific methods.
I like that. Skepticism and open-mindedness, a dynamic duo for navigating these uncharted territories.
Precisely. And if we approach these topics with both skepticism and a willingness to explore, I think we can gain some truly valuable insights, even if we don't arrive at definitive answers.
So what can we learn from combining the insights of the Law of One and these CIA programs? What wisdom can we glean from their convergence?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is that consciousness might be far more expansive and influential than we tend to realize. Both the Law of One and these programs suggest that our thoughts, our intentions, our energy might have a greater impact on reality than we currently understand.
So we're not just passive observers, but active participants in shaping our reality.
That's a key principle in the Law of One. And when we consider the CIA's exploration of things like mind control and psychic abilities, it raises some thought-provoking questions about the power of our own minds and the potential for influencing the world around us.
It's definitely a lot to think about, and it makes me wonder if we could tap into the full potential of our consciousness. What could we achieve? What kind of transformations could we create in ourselves and in the world?
Those are excellent questions, and I think they lead us to the heart of what we can learn from combining these perspectives. It's about recognizing our own power, our own responsibility, and our own potential for growth and evolution.
So it's not just about psychic spies or secret government programs. It's about understanding ourselves, our place in the universe,
Mhm.
and the infinite possibilities that lie within our own consciousness.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think it's a message that resonates deeply with the teachings of the Law of One.
This has been such a fascinating exploration so far, and I'm eager to see where it leads us next. Do we have time for one more intriguing detail before we wrap up this part of our deep dive? Because I know you've got plenty more up your sleeve.
You know me too well. And yes, there is one more detail I want to share that connects the Law of One's concept of choice to those ethically questionable experiments conducted as part of MKUltra. But we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, you've got me hooked. I can't wait to hear what you've got. All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the connections between those secret CIA programs and the Law of One.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have from mind control experiments to universal consciousness. And you promised us one last intriguing detail before we wrap up. Something connecting the Law of One's idea of choice to those ethically questionable experiments in MKUltra. I'm all ears.
You know, those MKUltra experiments, as messed up as they were, they actually raise a question that's relevant to all of us. What question is that? Think about it. MKUltra was all about manipulating minds, controlling people's thoughts and actions against their will. A chilling example of how external forces try to override our agency. But what's fascinating is that the Law of One, coming from a totally different perspective, also talks about choice. It emphasizes that even facing challenges and manipulations, we still have the power to choose.
So you're saying that even those being experimented on still had a choice on some level.
It's complex, for sure, and I'm definitely not condoning those actions. But the Law of One suggests that choice is always there, even in the toughest situations. It might not be a choice about our external situation, but it's about our internal response, our attitude, our thoughts, our intentions.
So even when we feel powerless, we still have control over our inner world.
Exactly. And that inner world, according to the Law of One, is what shapes our reality. Our thoughts, beliefs, emotions. They create ripples that go outward, influencing the world around us.
So even in those MKUltra experiments, those individuals could still choose how to react.
That's a possibility worth thinking about. And it brings us to a crucial point. The Law of One suggests that spiritual evolution lies in making choices aligned with love, compassion, and understanding.
So it's not just about having free will. It's about using that free will to make choices that elevate us and contribute to the well-being of others.
That's a central theme, and it's something we can all apply to our own lives, regardless of our circumstances.
It's a good reminder. Even amidst chaos, we can choose love and light.
Exactly. And that choice has a ripple effect. It goes beyond our individual lives. It contributes to the positive evolution of consciousness for all beings.
This has been a mind-blowing deep dive. We've explored government secrets, channeled teachings, and the potential of human consciousness.
We've confronted some tough truths, challenged our assumptions about reality, and maybe glimpsed a universe more interconnected than we imagined.
What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, the most important one is that consciousness matters. Our thoughts, intentions, choices, they all have an impact. And whether we realize it or not, we're shaping our reality, contributing to the collective consciousness of humanity.
So we're not just observers, but active creators of our experience.
That's the message from both the Law of One and those CIA programs, however unintentionally.
And what about the skeptics out there?
I'd say stay curious. Keep exploring. Question your assumptions. Stay open to the possibility of more than meets the eye.
Because the journey is the real reward,
Right.
right? Even without definitive answers, asking questions, exploring different perspectives, that's transformative in itself.
It is, and that's the spirit of the deep dive. To dive into the mysteries, challenge conventional thinking, and empower us to be more conscious creators.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, the exploration doesn't end here. The Law of One, those declassified files, and the mysteries of consciousness, it's all waiting for you to delve deeper, discover your own connections, and find your truth.
Keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. The universe is full of wonder, and the journey is just beginning.